Welcome to another low production video by Terry. I've got a little bit of a cold, so excuse me for that. But we've talked about what the flesh actually is in the last video. This video here, we're going to talk about some of the more detailed characteristics of the flesh. It's very important. But the next video after this one, I believe, is probably one of the most important things you'll ever hear in your entire life. And I say that with a humble confidence, but I think the next video, we're going to talk about how to transition from the flesh to the spirit. And I think it's like a lifelong lesson, the most critical thing that I've ever learned, and that I think that everyone needs, whether you're not born again, whether you're born again. How to walk after the Spirit and what you have to do in the inner man to do that. And I'm going to walk you through the details. But for this video, okay, we're going to get into some more characteristics and details of the flesh, because it's very important that you're able to identify some of those characteristics. All right, so let's start talking about that. But again, we have to set the stage, and we're learning some critical foundations here and still learning some definitions. Remember, most people, Christians or not, are walking around following after the impulses of their flesh. This is why their lives are in shambles. This is why their marriages don't work. This is why a lot of people drive other people away from them. Why they cause damage in relationships. This is why most people live with some degree of misery. People are full of anxiety, loneliness, emptiness, fear. The list is long. So the point of this video is to give you some detail of the sinister characteristics of the flesh. All right. Now, again, briefly, when we say the flesh, we're talking about your body, which is unsubmitted to the Spirit. And your body produces thoughts and emotions, all right? Listen, the more you experience the Spirit of God, the more you taste of the life of Jesus, the more you're going to recognize the flesh, okay? And that only comes by experience. Now, why do you need to recognize it? So that you don't walk after it, all right? So that you can catch it early and submit to the Spirit again. Submit yourself to the Spirit. Why? Because if you're not walking after the Spirit and you're walking after the flesh, you're going to create devastation. There's going to be a wake of destruction around your entire life. You're going to just damage everything and everybody. Plus, you won't be enjoying the peace and the joy of Christ. You're going to be interpreting the world around you based on lies, based on your human understanding, based on your faulty human emotions, based on your pride and your religious flesh and your arrogance and deception. So, excuse me. Anyway, here we go. Paul explains the deeds of the flesh in Galatians 5:19. He says, now, the deeds of the flesh are evident, which are immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, which is basically witchcraft, enmities, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, disputes, dissensions, factions, envying, drunkenness, carousing, and things like these. Now, here are the things like these, all right? First of all, one of the major characteristics of the flesh, it's very fearful, often masked with anxiety, concerns, overplanning, micromanaging. Another basic characteristic of the flesh, pride, full of itself, completely self-focused. Most conversations, if you notice, that human beings have are waiting for the other person to finish speaking so you can talk about yourself. That reminds me of me, something I want to say. Rarely are people genuinely interested in what the other person is saying. It's amazing. The flesh is full of imaginations of the worst kind. It imagines things. It assigns meaning to things. It doesn't mean anything a lot of times. But it assigns meanings, and it has imagination based on projections and assumptions, like they're plotting against me. They're out to get me. Only I know the truth about this. It's horrible. The flesh loves drunkenness and drugs and mind-altering substances. The flesh loves violence and destruction. Think about a pack of wolves, animals. When they smell blood and they smell weakness, they attack. It attacks the weak and the vulnerable. The flesh talks and talks and talks and simply does not want to be concise because it loves itself and wants to take over the entire atmosphere in the room and spread itself over everybody and everything like a virus. The flesh also loves to be shut down and non-participatory, and it wants to hide and just be quiet and observe and not participate. The flesh does not want to be still and worship God and pray. It hates worship. It can't. When you worship God and pray, do those activities, people start squirming if you do it for very long. They're ready to talk about something. They're ready to read the Bible, ready to have a discussion about theology. Okay? The flesh never wants to be wrong. The flesh, this shows up in conversations with other people. It feels like it has to win the argument. The flesh will learn how to look humble in order to win the conversation. Sometimes it will even appear to be wrong so that it can still be right and win. The flesh wants to be tempted. Think about that one. The flesh will use the excuse of, I'm trying to follow God. I want to do what's right, but I can't. It's too hard. I don't know how. The flesh wants to always feel defeated in some way. It always lives out the cycle of, I want to, I'm trying, but I can't. But I want to, I'm trying, but I can't. Even the trying the flesh does is a scheme to maintain the appearance of good intentions while still maintaining control. The flesh wants to be working on something all the time. It wants to achieve some better level. It wants to move to a higher plane. It wants to arrive at some improved degree, some better status. It wants to figure something out. It wants to solve some kind of a problem. It loves problem solving. Just for clarification, let me say this. Am I saying that solving problems is fleshly? Well, no, not at all. If your mind and your heart and your body are all submitted to the Spirit, then problem solving is not a bad activity at all, okay? But if not, then the problem solving you're doing is simply a craving of your flesh because it loves intricacies and it loves puzzles and it loves mysteries so that it can immerse itself in a world of complexity. It likes all that kind of stuff so that it can solve it. The flesh is also addictive in nature. The flesh will create problems where there are no problems. Perhaps you've experienced that in your life. The flesh is always in some kind of non-reality. It's usually focused on how bad things are or how bad things are going to be. Or you can have a fleshly high, right? And be falsely focused on how great things are. It'll focus on anything but God. It's incapable of that. Talking about fear again. The flesh is fearful, but rarely does it walk around expressing pure and obvious fear. It likes to mask it with more noble intentions. Fear is usually repackaged as anxiety. I'm concerned about this or that. Over-planning, over-scheduling your life, micromanaging others, curiosity, questions, endless questions, trying to find some type of security. The flesh will have a general feeling all the time as if something is always wrong, that things need to be changed, things need to be improved in some way, when there's actually nothing wrong at all. The flesh will feel like something must be wrong. It will usually find something to focus on eventually. The flesh wants to be taken care of. It doesn't want to take the responsibility for life. It doesn't want to take the ball, right? That's kind of like the passive variety of flesh. The flesh also wants to take the bull by the horns. It'll attack situations in life instead of trusting and waiting on God. The flesh will pretend that it doesn't see the truth or that it doesn't understand. I don't understand. In order to get away with something, like in order to get away with staying in control. The flesh will use confusion in order not to change. It will actually confuse itself on purpose without facing it, of course, in order to not lose control and lose its place on the throne, right? The flesh loves to fight, and any variety will do. Controversy, disputes, mental jousting with others, always one-upping or topping the other person. The flip side is always given. No matter what is said, the flesh will find some opposite point of view. Yeah, but. The flesh will go to great lengths to actually create situations of tension and conflict. Sometimes in a moment, and sometimes it'll plot for weeks to do so. Then it'll complain about the very situations it's created of tension. Religious flesh hides well here. Often apologetics, defending the truth, seeking the truth, discussing the truth, or many times a disguise for the flesh to flex its muscles. Now, there is a good way and a godly way to seek and discuss truth that's not fleshly, that's done in peace. Okay? But the flesh takes pride in being right and standing on the truth, even at the expense of other people, even if it tears them down. It's incapable of speaking the truth in love, which is what we're called to do. The flesh loves to be busy. It prides itself in busyness and being important and having so many things to do all the time. The flesh is usually very opinionated. Now, there's nothing wrong with having an opinion, but being extremely opinionated is usually coming from a fleshly place because it's full of itself. To have an opinion or an argument about everything in life is typically fleshly. Having the need to broadcast your opinion is usually a characteristic of the flesh. The flesh loves money. Money provides security and power. And longing for money and a life full of the pursuit of money is a characteristic of the flesh. And Jesus spoke about that. The flesh also loves poverty. Some varieties of flesh prefer things to be difficult and hard. It's actually fleshly to think that it's more godly to suffer and be without. When you feel in control and powerful inside yourself, I'm in control, I feel powerful, you're typically according to the flesh. The flesh is constantly analyzing. It's a lot like a computer. It's constantly dissecting every situation and every conversation. It's meticulous. The flesh is also lazy of heart. It doesn't want to do the work that it takes to trust and believe God. It doesn't want to die. The flesh is also passive and self-consumed. The flesh is arrogant and confident. The flesh promises that if you give it what it wants, it'll be satisfied. That's a lie. If you give in to the flesh to satisfy it, it will only want more. It'll feel satisfied in the short term, But to feed it will only strengthen the monster. It makes it worse. The flesh is impulsive. It's a strong reactor. It throws a fit when it doesn't get its way or feels threatened. If you corner it, it reacts strongly. The flesh can make extreme decisions quickly, and it can become extremely irrational in a matter of seconds. The flesh is also a weak reactor. It feels defeated and hopeless and helpless. Help me. The flesh is constantly scheming in order to change things or solve dilemmas. The flesh avoids. The selfish flesh, it's self-protective. It's independent. It wants to do its own thing and call all the shots. The flesh is self-reliant. It hides and loves secrecy. The flesh is overly complex. It's given to change. The flesh seeks and looks for the worst in other people. The flesh compares itself to other people. The flesh is impatient. The flesh is often irritated. The flesh is frustrated. The flesh blames others and refuses to take responsibility. The flesh loves itself. The flesh can also have feelings of self-hatred. I'm a worm. I'm no good, which also is the same thing as loving itself. It's just another form of self-focus. The flesh wants to be worshipped. It doesn't feel good enough. The flesh also feels like it knows. It knows the hearts and motives of other people. The flesh justifies itself and is defensive. The flesh almost always disagrees. It's contrary by nature. The flesh complains, it whines, and is discontent, and the flesh is bored. Now, we should not use this list to accuse others or point out their shortcomings. That would be the flesh as well. We should use it to humble ourselves, right? Now, there's religious versions to almost every variety of the flesh in order to make it seem more palatable, because we learn as Christians to Christianize and improve our flesh. Sometimes two different people, or even the same person at different times, can speak the exact same words, but one person is coming from a place of the flesh and the other from a place of the Spirit. So how are you to know the difference? The flesh always has the trademark of arrogance, control, and the stench of death. Look at Galatians 6:8. Now, some of the more benign or impotent expressions of the flesh can seem to not have quite the same stench of death, the taste of death, but the death is still there nonetheless. If you're around it long enough, okay, you're going to feel drained, as though the life's being sucked out of you. Okay, whether it's you yourself or you're around somebody else that's according to the flesh. Okay, now even when you're around even yourself, you're going to feel drained, but around other people, you're going to feel drained too. Another way to talk about the stench or the taste of death is like, we could say the opposite, the lack of the life of Jesus. See, the life of Jesus is encouraging, uplifting, provides vitality and energizes, gives hope. It's full of love, full of the truth. It builds up, it's strengthening to the inner man. And if you're not experiencing these things in yourself, then you're probably living according to the flesh with just religious concepts. And the flesh is on the throne of your heart. And if you're around other people who are not full of God's life, then they're going to make you feel drained and used and empty and obligated and emotionally spent and lonely. And it's probably because they're according to the flesh, right? And if you yourself sometimes are according to the Spirit, and then you're spending time with people that are after the flesh, then you're going to feel a lot of times tempted to leave the Spirit and become after the flesh yourself. And that makes for the worst situation when two or more people are together and everybody's according to the flesh, spending time together and joined together. And that creates for like an atmosphere. It's not just in yourself, but it like fills the room, right, with death. And so that's where all non-Christians live. They have no other option because they don't have the Spirit of God in them to walk after him. Now, religious flesh is the worst kind because it thinks it's right. And it's in love, it's in love with itself, but it thinks it's in love with Jesus. And it's really in love with its own opinions. And religious flesh, religious people who walk around according to the flesh are often very opinionated. And they just think they're right. And they have strong views. And they're really more in love with themselves and their opinions than they're in love with God or God's people. So there you have it. Remember, excuse me, the next video will be extremely important. And we're going to discuss how to transition from the flesh to the spirit. So we'll see you next time.